Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream. Thank you so much for tuning in for another show. Welcome to all of our members, subscribers, and viewers from all across the world. And thank you so much again for tuning in. Tonight, we're going to be talking about a couple of subjects. One of them is going to be Donald Trump winning the elections in the United States. What led us to this moment? What does that mean? What are the changes happening in the United States? And what are we looking to anticipate from that moving forward when it comes to the Palestinian issue and the Lebanese issue and the problems in the region of West Asia? But we're not just going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the unprecedented attacks coming today from Hezbollah. They targeted central Israel with new weapons, and they also targeted the north with new weapons as well. And we're also going to hear the response of the resistance to the new United States President Donald Trump. And we're going to begin with this. Donald Trump, he had a victory speech after he won the elections by a majority. And he stated a couple of things that I wanted to share with you in this live stream, and then we will share a couple of other things when it comes to his statements. So, Donald Trump, this was one part of his speech.
Of the people that voted for us, nobody's ever seen anything like that. They came from all corners: union, non-union, African American, Hispanic American, Asian American, Arab American, Muslim American. We had everybody, and it was beautiful. It was a historic realignment, uniting citizens of all backgrounds around a common core of common sense. You know, we're the party of common sense. We want to have borders. We want to have security. We want to have things be good, safe. We want great education. We want a strong and powerful military, and ideally, we don't have to use it. You know, we had no wars. 4 years, we had no wars, except we defeated ISIS. We defeated ISIS in record time. But we had no wars. They said, he will start a war. I'm not going to start a war. I'm going to stop wars. But this is also a massive victory for democracy and for freedom.
This was the main point that I wanted to get to, the fact that we're going to stop wars. And he also had previous statements when it comes to Ukraine that I wanted to share with you that also indicate that he's looking towards certain changes when it comes to Ukraine, where he had this statement. Let's share this statement with you.
They just don't know what to do. They're locked into a situation. It's sad. They just don't know what to do because Ukraine is gone. It's not Ukraine anymore. You can never replace those cities and towns, and you can never replace the dead people, so many dead people. Any deal, even the worst deal, would have been better than what we have right now. If they made a bad deal, it would have been much better. They would have given up a little bit, and everybody would be living, and every building would be built, and every tower would be aging for another 2,000 years.
So, of course, he mentioned a couple of things with regards to the wars. Donald Trump also criticized the wars waged by previous administrations in the what is labeled by Western terms as the Middle East or West Asia, and he criticized the war in Iraq as well. And now he's saying, I'm going to end all wars, and he's criticizing the war in Ukraine as well, because from his perspective, he's saying that he doesn't want to spend all of that money. How are his talks going to be implemented on the ground? That's something very important. But before that, we're going to talk about how we reached this moment. So many people clearly in the United States still believe in the two-party system. Clearly, the alternatives, primarily Jill Stein, who came in third, and also came in second to Trump in certain locations. I believe it was Michigan or parts of Michigan. Clearly, the majority of the American population are still fully following the two-party system. And that's why you had Donald Trump coming in, because from their perspective, there's only one candidate who can win. It's either Republican or a Democrat. And that's why we had a very small percentage of voters going for the alternatives. And if we're talking about people who have concerns when it comes to human rights and genuinely oppose war and genocide, a minority of the votes went to the alternatives, mainly Jill Stein, really, who came in third according to recent polls. But there was a massive swing, of course, and in key locations. One of them was Michigan, moving from the Democrats to the Republicans. Why was that? Well, first, we had a couple of endorsements coming in from certain figures in the Muslim and Arab community in the United States to Donald Trump. They said that he promised them, he's going to stop all wars. And of course, there might be something to do with certain traditional or conservative approaches socially when it comes to Donald Trump. However, the main thing here is they've had 1 year of the administration of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris facilitating, supporting, and covering up a massive genocide. And they had an opportunity to correct their path, but they did not. They insisted on continuing. And people from the perspective of people who already voted for Biden, Kamala Harris, and the Democratic Party, they said, well, we have a track record of you. And many of them would have probably assumed that we don't want to waste the votes as they see it on any alternative. So we'll vote for Donald Trump, especially following his statements. However, did everyone read the statements of Donald Trump accurately? And what has been the pattern of Donald Trump previously? Donald Trump made very clear statements in support of Israel. That's not something new. And Donald Trump implemented many things during his term between 2016 and 2020 that support the state of Israel. As a matter of fact, the squatting establishment in Israel was celebrating the win of Donald Trump because they believe that Donald Trump is going to allow everything now, facilitate even more genocide, more land grabbing, and potentially recognize the legitimacy of the Israeli occupation in the West Bank. However, many of his statements seemed to have more than one meaning, especially when we talk about ending the wars, although he had very clear statements in support of Israel and also criticizing the Palestinian side. That's not something that anyone can deny. But the fact of the matter is, he's here now. There are people who are celebrating his arrival when it comes to Israel. There are people who are celebrating his arrival from the Palestinian supporting side. And there are people who are worried. If we look at it statistically, he had an increase when it comes to the Latin vote in America. Many more people from the Latin community, Latino community in the United States voted for Donald Trump. And he had an increase in the Arab and Muslim community. However, when it comes to the Jewish community, and of course the Jewish community would be split. Some of them would be supportive of Israel, some of them not. We had many people pro-Israel, many people no, and having protests and encampments, and many of them being imprisoned as well. 31% of them voted Trump. 31% of the Jewish community in the United States voted for Donald Trump. That means almost 70% voted for Kamala Harris and the Democrats. Now, if we go back to Donald Trump's first term, Donald Trump had problems with certain organizations in the United States, although he is funded by people who are very linked to the state of Israel, primarily Miriam Edelson, who gave him more than 100 million to his campaign. And by the way, the campaign in total cost the two parties $3.6 billion US dollars. Can you imagine that number? $3.6 billion US dollars on an election campaign. Okay, so some of them are worried. Why? Because from their perspective, Trump has also supporters who are, more far right and criticize the lobby inside of Israel and inside of the United States, and there are certain voices in Israel who are concerned. Why are certain voices in Israel concerned, and why are other voices celebrating? The voices celebrating because they know that Trump had the record of moving the embassy to Jerusalem, recognizing the Israeli sovereignty in the Golan Heights, and facilitating the Abraham Accords with some Arab countries. However, the worry that's coming from Israel is a notion that it was Jared Kushner who was in charge of all of that. Jared Kushner, because he was in the administration before, and it wasn't necessarily just Donald Trump doing all of that. And they are concerned because Jared Kushner is not playing a part in the current administration, because according to these reports coming from Israel, he wouldn't have someone pushing for those campaigns that are pro settlements or squatting establishments inside of Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu, of course, congratulated him, but there are certain sides in Israel who are worried. How relevant is that? To the pattern of Donald Trump, and are we expected to see something else from him? And I will get to in a minute how that's going to affect the resistance happening in the region, and also Iran. Well, according to his statements, we will be expecting someone to start, picking up the troops, right? The American troops in the region, closing the bases and getting out of Iraq, getting out of Syria, getting out of the region in total. Because if you don't want that money spent abroad in America first, you're going to do that. Is he going to do that? We're going to have to see. First, we have 2.5 months of the Biden administration. It's not like Donald Trump's going to immediately be in power. We still have up until around the 28th of January 2025, where he is going to basically become the acting president. So between now and then, we still have the Democratic Party running the show when it comes to Benjamin Netanyahu. And traditionally, let's not forget that Israel received whatever it wanted when it comes to the United States, whether from the Democrats or from the Republicans, because Israel is like a sacred entity when it comes to the United States establishment, and when it comes to the funding of the state of Israel, and when it comes to the situation when it comes to Israeli actions and aggressions. That is also going to be seen when Donald Trump comes, when it comes to Ukraine. Because he previously said that he's going to resolve the matters. And although Russia didn't really send him anything to congratulate him, because they said the United States, we consider them an unfriendly country. That was the spokesperson for the Kremlin. We also had Iran. Iran said, well, the government spokesperson, she said the result of the US presidential election is not worrying us. In our opinion, there is no much difference between these two individuals. So Iran is not really thinking about who's going to come to power. and they are continuing the path of development, of course, coordination, and clearly the support of the resistance in the region, which leads us to the resistance. The most significant statements came from Sheikh Naim Qasim. Naim Qasim, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, who said they do not count on the United States president, and they do not count on politics. What they count on is the battlefield. Sheikh Naim Qasim said that we count on the battlefield. We're not waiting for any American president. They're all the same from our perspective. And we focus on what we have to do in the battlefield. And talking about the battlefield, today we had unprecedented attacks coming from Hezbollah. Hezbollah targeted central Israel, the Tzrifin base next to Ben Gurion Airport, with Fateh 110 missiles. Fateh is a continuation or a developed version of the Zilzal missile. You're talking about hundreds of kilometers in range, but a half a ton warhead. So they introduced that missile, and they introduced a new missile called Jihad 2. That's a shorter range missile that they were using on the part of Israel. Especially, the biggest damage came from an area called Avivim. Avivim, and I'm going to share this with you here. The Hezbollah targeted it with this new missile. Where did this link go? Here we go. So, this is Avivim. After the new Hezbollah missile. So we're talking about advanced missiles being used from Hezbollah, both on the north and on central Israel. We had also these in Israel. These were some of the landings next to Ben Gurion Airport. Here you can see the watchtower of the Ben Gurion Airport, and there were reports that Boeing 777 was hit or had damage to it following the attacks from Hezbollah. And these were more images coming from Avivim today. Clearly heavy landings coming from Hezbollah on the northern parts of Israel. So in total, Hezbollah launched today over 150 missiles on Israel, and they launched the biggest barrage of missiles into central Israel in history. These areas were targeted heavily previously by the Palestinian resistance, but Hezbollah, they targeted them in a very heavy manner today. And like I said, they introduced the new missiles for the first time in history. They introduced their new missiles, And they also shared some of these footages here about the actual missile. This is the new missile, Fateh 110. And that's them launching a couple of missiles to distract the Iron Dome. And then we had the launch of the missile itself afterwards. That landed inside of the designated area that they wanted to target inside of Israel. Which leads us to the speech itself of the Secretary General of Hezbollah, Naim Qassem. Today marks the 40th day of the martyrdom of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, and that's why we had a significant attack from Hezbollah. The historic attack on central Israel and the introduction of 2 new missiles to the battlefield. And that's why we had a speech coming from the new Secretary General of Hezbollah. And I got some of the highlights of the Secretary General because he was addressing, of course, the developments on the ground. He was addressing President Trump and the US administration, Netanyahu, his statements, and where the resistance is going to. So these were some of the things that he said. He said Netanyahu said he doesn't want to stop the war and he is looking to change the Middle East. These were some of the statements of Benjamin Netanyahu. We're looking to change the Middle East, and he made other statements as well that, you know, if Israel goes down, the whole world goes down with us. Imagine the lunacy in these statements and the level of psychopathy. Like, if we go down, the whole world goes down with us. He also added, he doesn't know he faces people who do not fear death. And many people are asking, according to the Secretary General of Hezbollah, when will this aggression end? And according to him, according to the Secretary General of Hezbollah, Naim Qassem, one thing will end the war: the battlefield. The battlefield will end the war, nothing else. So they're not counting on any negotiations. They're not counting on any political developments. In its 2 dimensions, the battlefield in its 2 dimensions, the border attacks where the resistance fighters are fighting the occupation forces, and the other dimension is the internal attacks, meaning on Israel when it comes to the missiles and drones that are landing continuously on Israel. He said we have tens of thousands of fighters. Thank God we have enough. He said Israel will scream from our missiles and UAVs, there are no limits to our attacks, and they will only increase. They will only increase. And so far, we have only seen an increase in the pattern of Hezbollah. Very calculated, very strategic, taking everything into consideration, but an increase. Like today, they're landing a half-a-ton warhead in central Israel, and half-ton warheads with short-range missiles in North Israel. These are significant developments. He continued, we do not build any hopes on political developments to end this war. And we do not rely on the US elections, Harris or Trump, or on any political efforts. We focus on the battlefield. The enemy is losing in the battlefield. Our aim as the resistance is to prevent the enemy from achieving the objectives that they put for the war. They try to cause harm to people so they can apply pressure on the resistance, but that won't work because the people love the resistance. They try to instill division, he continued, between the evacuated, the people, of course, fleeing their homes from the south primarily, And the rest of the population, many of them who are helping them seek shelter and get shelter. And he said that failed. The population as a whole in Lebanon know that they will be targeted next. The strength of the resistance, he added, doesn't mean having equal power to the enemy. There was never a case where there was a resistance that faced a state or an occupier with the same power. Our power, according to Naim Qasim, is that we have will and we confront. And with these, we are more powerful. With the will and with the confrontation. We only have our heads raised up high, and there is no option for our fighters but victory. This is the era of victories. The era of defeats has ended. That was from Naim Qasim. So, Hezbollah, escalation, not relying on any political moves, not relying on Trump nor Harris, not relying on any negotiations, relying and focusing solely on the battlefield where they are achieving accomplishments every single day. And we're seeing more and more advanced attacks and heavier attacks coming from the Lebanese resistance when it comes to attacking Israel. They're always increasing when it comes to Israel. And Israel is in a very bad state. They have been saying in the beginning, since they started the escalation with Lebanon, we want to eliminate Hezbollah. You know, that's something that Gallant had. Now he's sacked. We want to eliminate Hezbollah. But now we have more reports in Israel saying that we're not far away from the objectives of the war. You know, we're about to end the war. Because, we hurt Hezbollah really bad. What do you mean you hurt Hezbollah really bad? You have 5-6 divisions sitting there, over 65,000 troops. You're intending to reach Beirut. You have enough divisions there to reach Beirut if you want. But you can hardly go in a few steps and then you get back. Now they had to withdraw from Al-Khiyam, which we spoke about a couple of days ago, following massive hits from the Lebanese resistance and the Palestinian resistance giving them heavy blows. We've seen footage coming from the Palestinian resistance targeting them with side bombs that they made and targeting general forces left, right, and center in Gaza and in North Gaza, where they're instilling all of this ethnic cleansing campaign, starvation campaign on the population. But in Lebanon, they're suffering heavily. Like most of their forces are in Lebanon, but they are unable to achieve anything on the ground. The only things that they've achieved were the targeted assassinations. And that's about it. Targeted assassinations, the pager attack. And apart from that, it's destruction of buildings, civilian buildings, a killing of innocent people, killing of targeting infrastructure, killing healthcare staff, and the usual Israeli stuff that they do. But now we have an interesting revelation. So many people ask and talk about the number of casualties, when it comes to Israel. And now we're having more reports coming from Israel that we at least have 10,000 Israelis killed from the IDF killed. Okay. This is coming from, and let me check if I can try and share this link with you. This is coming from a man called former Major General Noam Tibon. Former Major General Noam Tibon. The report said former Israeli Major General reveals that the Israeli occupation military is suffering from a severe shortage of manpower amid the ongoing war on Gaza and Lebanon. Military experts who have previously held senior positions in the Israeli occupation military confirmed that the war has come at a heavy cost, one that is beyond what the soldiers of the Israeli army can bear. Former Major General Noam Tibon, who served as the commander of the Israeli military's Northern Corps, said, quote, "Unfortunately, the Israeli army is not telling the truth. We are short of 10,000 soldiers in this war, the equivalent of a full division." So he's confirming that at least a full division has been eliminated. And this is a man, by the way, who fiercely criticizes Netanyahu. The Israeli occupation military also lost another division between killed and wounded throughout the war, Tibon told the Israeli Channel 12. It is worth noting that several shortages of manpower within the Israeli occupation military have been reported, with reports revealing major reduction in combat soldiers, while the Israeli occupation government drafts the exemption of the Haredi community from the military service. Noam Tibon had many articles in the past year criticizing the government and criticizing what it does in Gaza and elsewhere. He criticized Netanyahu heavily many times, and he is now coming up with these statements, that, well, where the government is hiding the numbers. What does that mean? The government is hiding the number. That means that they are, of course, suffering way more than they are declaring, and that all should be included in the analysis of the situation on the ground. So when you have someone like Netanyahu saying we want to reshape the Middle East, and all of these dramatic announcements. Now he might be, honest when it comes to his plans. They definitely want to change stuff. They want to have a greater Israel, but on the ground they're suffering heavily. How can you change the shape of the Middle East when you haven't achieved any of your objectives in Gaza? And none of your objectives in Lebanon. And again, this is what people sometimes get confused about. They'll see the destruction and the level of martyrs in Gaza. They'll say, how can you call this a defeat for Israel when they've caused so much destruction? Well, talk about the military objectives. That's simply it. This is how you calculate things. What is the military objective? Has it been achieved or not? Israel's official military objectives in Gaza: eliminating Hamas, getting back the Israeli prisoners of war, and making sure Gaza doesn't pose a threat on Israel ever again. And their objective in the north is getting all of the squatters back to the north. Have they achieved any of them? No. They have destroyed, they killed, they're committing a genocide, but they haven't achieved anything. And they're doing all of this destruction to cover up their military failure. And that's what people need to remember. So if you, as Israel, if you're unable to get rid of the least equipped power when it comes to the resistance fronts, which is Gaza, how are you going to go anywhere else? You're not done with Gaza. You're not done. You haven't achieved any of your objectives. Nothing. How can you go elsewhere? So if you want to create the greater Israel, well, finish it bit by bit. Finish what you're doing with Gaza. Go to Lebanon, show us some success, and then talk about other stuff. But they're, of course, talking about so many things to try, again, part of the propaganda machine, to try and instill, fear and try and create a new pseudo reality where they are unable to even target or get rid of the resistance in Gaza. Now, saying all of that, is Benjamin Netanyahu likely to take certain decisions between now and the arrival of Donald Trump as the United States president, basically him taking power in January 2025? If he had a deal, there were talks about a deal. if he had a deal with Donald Trump before that he's not going to have an agreement with Gaza or Lebanon when Democrats are in power, well, that means we're going to have to wait up until Trump comes, and then something might happen. Assuming that these reports are correct. When it comes to the fact that they're not correct, let's say they're not correct, well, traditionally, Israel received everything that it wants, both from the Democrats and from the Republicans. And if they continue to receive whatever they want from the Democrats and from the Republicans, what incentive does Benjamin Netanyahu have to end the war? He wouldn't have an incentive. And even if he had this good relationship with Donald Trump, we have seen a pattern of defiance from Israel towards the United States, although the United States is its biggest supporter when it comes to the US establishment. Definitely not the population, but the United States establishment. So if Benjamin Netanyahu showed defiance with Joe Biden and with Kamala Harris, why would he not show defiance with Donald Trump? It's not like everything was great between him and Donald Trump previously. And we should also take into consideration the fact that Trump can be unpredictable. Trump can be unpredictable. And he wasn't really favored by many elements in the United States, including mainstream media, and doesn't take away from the fact that he committed heinous stuff during his term. And it doesn't give him like a badge of honor or anything of the sort. But there are certain disagreements, of course, in the establishment when it comes to Donald Trump. And also when it comes to Israel and the Israeli government. Well, Netanyahu proved time after time that he can say no to the United States. He made it clear that he can say no. As a matter of fact, it reached a stage where Benjamin Netanyahu said, if we're going to have to fight by ourselves, then we'll fight by ourselves. Him and his cabinet members said several times that we respect the United States administration, but that doesn't mean we need to listen to them with everything. Our priority is Israel. We also had Israel talking a lot about, and that's from a political perspective, from a security perspective, the previous defense minister, now Yoav Gallant, used to say that as well. We need to produce and manufacture our own weapons and not rely on the United States or anyone to manufacture our weapons, because we don't want that to be used as leverage against us when we're most at need. And although the United States gave Israel, well, from what we're seeing, what they need to continue this genocide, there were criticisms coming from Israel, from politicians as well, that there's a level of betrayal coming from the United States administration by using certain weapons that they haven't provided to Israel as leverage. But then again, when we're talking about Israel, we're talking about unbelievable levels of entitlement and greed and arrogance. So there is a very high likelihood that nothing will stop. From what we've seen so far, nothing stopped Benjamin Netanyahu. As a matter of fact, he strengthened his position now in the Israeli government, meaning he has more freedom to act based on exactly what he wants without scrutiny. Yoav Gallant was the man who used to challenge him. Yoav Gallant was the man who used to support the IDF chief of staff when Netanyahu had a problem with the IDF chief of staff too. Now, having a defense minister who is incompetent in terms of the position is basically making Benjamin Netanyahu a hyper minister, the ultimate minister of defense, the de facto minister of defense, which means he can order the ITF or whatever you want to call them to do whatever he wants without scrutiny. If the continuation serves Netanyahu, he will continue and he will expand. From what we've seen so far, he's only looking to expand. If the ceasefire, if the potential ceasefire would be suitable for Netanyahu primarily, and he believes that he has a secure enough government to continue serving as the Israeli prime minister from now up until the next Israeli elections, we talk about 2026, if I'm not mistaken, then he will have a ceasefire. But from what we've seen so far, the only thing that's stopping him is the active resistance, so the active use of force against Israel. Gaza, the resistance; Lebanon, the resistance; the other region, the other resistance fronts, and of course, the Iranian attacks. Because the Iranian attacks are creating a level of intimidation and they are creating a new equation. These are the main things that are holding Netanyahu slightly back. So, from what we've seen so far, the escalation is still going. Nothing has changed on the ground apart from developments that are related to the fronts, respectively, whether when it comes to Gaza or Lebanon. And we still have more than 2 months of the Democrats in power, which means no significant changes apart from the changes that Benjamin Netanyahu is doing inside of Israel, and whether these changes will reach a level that would push a massive move both from the Israeli population and certain figures in the Israeli establishment to take Netanyahu down once and for all and potentially reach a short-lived ceasefire. And these were the main things that I want to share with you tonight, guys. I took my time tonight, but now I'll give you your time. Let's take some questions with the time we have left. And again, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in for another live stream. Pilla, Laba Laba's World, and Pilla again, HS, and Elvira. Thank you very much for your supers. Laba Laba, Mahmoud, Trump and Putin have a good relationship. Do you think Putin will abandon Iran? No, I don't think the Russians are that naive. I don't think anyone in that front will be abandoning anyone for the sake of a United States president. Trump indeed had a good relationship with Vladimir Putin. Now, don't forget, the initial report said that Russia has a hold on Trump. So Putin has a hold on Trump from the time he used to visit Moscow before, so potentially blackmail stuff. And that's why we had all of that talk, by the way, before the 2016 elections. So many people used to claim that Trump is compromised because Russia has leverage on him. However, I do not think that Russia is that naive. Iran supported them heavily. They know that things come and go, but that the traditional position of the United States administration is hostility and aggression and recklessness towards Russia. And now we have the spokesperson today saying that the United States remains an unfriendly country. So no one's congratulating Donald Trump. However, he said he's going to stop the war. He said he's going to stop sending the billions. Let's see if he does. Let's see if he does. But I don't think Russia, China, or Iran will be relying on the goodwill of Donald Trump, because they know, well, whatever happens with Donald Trump, you're talking about just 4 years. And Pilla, you're saying hi, just tuning in now, and thank you again for that. You said, apologies if you've already discussed this. Is there any truth behind the rumors about a military coup in Israel this evening? No, but listen, I said from the beginning of this war that in Israel you have a perfect recipe for a military coup. Why is that? You have a reckless government with a reckless leader committing crimes against humanity, and you have objection coming from people or large chunks of the population, and you also have people in the establishment who hate him. There were suspicions that the United States tried to have a soft coup in Israel, primarily through the IDF chief of staff. Blinken tried to meet him in four eyes, something that the Israeli government did not allow, because at the time they said political delegations cannot meet military delegations or military figures privately without a level of political representation. And there were talks from back then. There were other reports that they were trying to prep the previous war cabinet member, Benny Gantz, and Gallant. And that could also be a potential reason why he sacked Gallant now, because he knows he has a good relationship with the Americans, and he does not want anyone inside his cabinet to have this relationship. Netanyahu wants to take down anyone who poses even a remote threat or danger to him, or what he perceives as danger. Narcissistic, paranoid, psychopathic lunatic. So he got rid of him. However, we haven't seen, in effect, a military coup, but we do have a lot of tensions, so that you can feel the tensions rising in the Israeli streets now. People are taking the streets again, and we still have conditions that are ideal to have a military coup. And at the time when I first spoke about a potential military coup and the fact that you have a perfect recipe for a military coup, I was talking about it as criticism to the Western countries who are supporting Israel heavily, saying that, well, if you have, a dog breaks a paw in Iran, you call for a regime change the next day, but a country committing genocide with people split when it comes to the head of that state, many people wishing him death, and people in his government against him, but you don't facilitate or support a military coup or regime change, right? These words are reserved to other countries, no, not Israel or, the Western genocide cartel. But who knows? That's something that might happen, but the days will come and we will see where things go. But so far, like I said before, I think Netanyahu is pushing all of the self-destruct buttons inside of Israel by his continuation of this genocide. Tam, you're saying, Mahmoud, do you think the Biden administration will go to war with Iran before Trump's inauguration? I highly doubt so. They showed unwillingness to. They tried to apply pressure on Israel to avoid an attack on Iran, and they said we'll help Israel to defend itself, but not to conduct an attack on Iran. I highly, highly doubt so, especially before the arrival of a new administration, because the tradition in the United States is you do not switch administrations during major war. So Biden wouldn't want to start something very big now that he knows that he cannot continue just within a couple of months. Perceived reality. Hi, Mahmoud, do you think there's an advantage of delaying Operation True Promise 3? I believe Iran should not rush. Wait for the right time. Patience is a virtue. Listen, I think the Iranians are smart and they calculate their moves. I don't think they would have wanted to do anything, during the elections. But we did have very blatant confirmations coming from Iran that we're going to respond. And the tone constantly increased. And they have to respond, because they can't create this precedent of Israel attacking them and them not responding. No, they have to respond. And they will respond. Most likely will respond. And the right time, that's again depending on them. Their previous delays proved to be a failure. Now, again, you can't go back and anticipate what's going to happen in the future. But where we're saying that, okay, they delayed it before. Did something happen? Did the U.S. force Israel to have a ceasefire or stop the genocide? No. Although the Americans told them that we're just 1 week away from a ceasefire. And Iran potentially done that as like a clever move to show the world what the United States is about, the United States administration. Not that they naively believed Biden and Harris. So I think they know when to respond. I think that response is coming, but I don't necessarily think it's going to be delayed for too long, because the war is still going. The genocide is still committing crimes against humanity, and they're talking about a potential additional attack, which they're calling a preemptive strike now, Israel. And Iran knows that, like, they might receive another strike. So they will most likely hit while the iron's hot. And that was from Perceived Reality. Deep Diver, do you think Trump will somehow take revenge from Netanyahu for dumping Trump and congratulating Biden before the results were official? Trump and easily find a replacement. I think they're past that now, because now he congratulated him and before the actual official results. And I think that Trump can use leverage against Benjamin Netanyahu if he wants. Listen, if anyone wants, as the president of the United States of America, you are in a powerful position. I don't care who's behind it and who's supporting it, whatever it is, you're the one calling the shots. You're the one making the decisions. If you are the president of the United States in America and you want to stop a country that relies primarily, if not solely, on your support, you can. You can use leverage to stop what they're doing. And I'm not just talking about saying I'm going to stop supporting you or I'm going to take you down if you want to, right? So there's no arguing when it comes to that. However, of course, Trump, he still received hundreds of billions from the Zionist lobby in the United States. Not like that's going to go to waste like that for no reason. And so the days will come and we will see what he does. Turkish Truth Hurts. What do you think of Israel's plans? I've heard there is oil in that region. They've also spoken about pipelines. Also, the Greater Israel Project. Will he continue invading other countries? If he gets his way in taking down the resistance against him, he will continue, of course. He will continue to other countries and implement the Greater Israel Project. And that would be something good in terms of the United States administration for them. So they would like that. But he's unable to. He's facing resistance from the most hardly hit areas, starting with Gaza. How is he going to go to other places? He's barely going a few inches in Lebanon and being kicked out because of the fierce resistance that's targeting him not only on the borders, but inside of Israeli territory. So it's going to be difficult for him. Like I said, if you want to have a Greater Israel, first you have to finish what you're doing in the main fronts. And like we said before, the escalation in Lebanon was Netanyahu running forward from a problem he hasn't solved yet. So all of a sudden he remembers that, oh, it's a priority to get the people back to the north, and let's take our forces to the north. Well, you haven't finished with Gaza. Get your prisoners back, right? Eliminate the Hamas. Show us that you can eliminate the Hamas. You can't do anything. So if they get their way, they will continue. And who knows where they will finish? No one really knows. They can continue expanding after the greater Israel. They'll create a greater Israel. And then find a fairy tale, right? A fairy tale that says God promised that to us, right? Ralph, Mahmoud, I think they wait for day 31 of the USA ultimatum to bring food, water, medicine to Gaza in. Well, that 30-day, it was a 30-day ultimatum. That expires exactly in 1 week. So on Wednesday, next week, the ultimatum is going to expire. Is Netanyahu going to do something or not? Now, mind you, that ultimatum was quite vague, you know. They never use something very definite when it comes to Israel. But let's see. We previously saw increased aid going in to North Gaza after Biden had these harsh conversations with Netanyahu. Are they going to do it again? We'll see next Wednesday or Thursday. Okay, let's take last couple of questions. And Cookie Dough, thank you. You said the preemptive strike is just a bad excuse for an attack. Of course, an imperialist and colonizer that invented that idiotic and violent term. Yeah, of course. I mean, what preemptive strike? The United States having a preemptive strike? You're starting the wars all across the world. The colonial Western establishment is are the mass terrorists wreaking havoc across the world, and they're telling you counter or preemptive strike. What do you mean? Does Iran have bases next to the United States, or is it the United States planting its bases all across the world? Is the United States doing that? So they'll come up with any excuse, though, if they want to hit Iran, really. They'll have many excuses, but there are many things holding them back from attacking Iran, and primarily Iran's power, and then the fact that they have an increased coordination with Russia and with China and other countries too. And the United States knows that if they were to go on an all-out war against Iran, that they will be met with potential retaliation from Russia and from China. Russia is about to declare a very important strategic agreement with Iran that will potentially be a defense pact. There were reports that it's going to be a defense pact. When I spoke to Kevok the other day from Syrian, and I said he read an article in Russian. I think I haven't seen it, but he said that it spoke about a defense pact. So that's most likely the case. Well, in which case, if you attack Iran, then you're attacking Russia. And then China is the biggest oil consumer, Iranian oil consumer. They're not just going to let that go away like that. So no matter what the United States wants to do, there are limits. There are limits. And don't forget that the general tone now in the United States is just to get the hell out. You know? Mind our own business. That's what the United States should do. It should mind its own business, leave the region of West Asia to its people. If you want to have agreements with countries, have agreements with countries, but don't intimidate people, or try to at least intimidate people with your presence, and act like the international police or something. And focus on the American citizen. And of course, the United States. And again, we are seeing the new multipolar world taking place. The United States will still remain like a superpower. It's not like the United States is going to be some sort of a... No, the United States is a powerful country. But at a global affairs level, they should mind their own business and understand that this world belongs to everyone, not just greedy elites profiteering of the misery of other populations, and move forward. And we'll wrap it up there, guys. Thank you so much for your participation. We'll wrap it up there. Thank you for everyone who commented. And of course, apologies, we haven't reached all of them for the time limit. Cookie Dough Pilla, Laba Laba's World, and Pilla again, and HS, and Elvira, Gabriela. Thank you very much for your supers. I'll hopefully have a video after this and another live stream tomorrow. In the meantime, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in again. Stay blessed. Have a good rest of the day, night, or morning, depending on where you are. And I will see you soon in the next video. Peace, everyone. Take care.